Well, let me just say one quick thing about your statement of what happened the last time I spoke at NAMI. I just want to say it's not about me. Actually, I think it is about, in part, anastagnosia and about what we can do about it. That's the reason the room was packed and there was standing room only and there was excitement. And sometimes people think it's because, I have something unique. It's not that I have something unique, it's that this message is very important and vital for family members. As you know, I'm a family member. I'm somebody who had a brother with schizophrenia who also had anasagnosia. And anasagnosia is a symptom of the illness of a range of psychotic illnesses, not only schizophrenia. We see it in bipolar disorder as well, and schizoaffective disorder. And it's been recognized now in the scientific literature, really in terms of scientific consensus, since at least 1999. It basically simply is this. When someone says, I'm not sick, for months, years, even decades, they're not in denial, they're not being stubborn, they have anasagnosia, they have a symptom of the illness, just like a hallucination or delusion or a negative symptom. I can start by saying it was vitally important to me as a family member, because I used to argue with my brother. The first time he became ill, I spent a week arguing with him. And at Leap Institute, when we do our Leap trainings, one of the questions our faculty always asks the audience is, when they tell my story or they tell similar stories, how do you think Xavier got his brother into the hospital? And hands go up and people always say he had to call the police, because I argued for a week with my brother. And I can tell you, calling the police on my brother, who was also my best friend at the time, was by far the hardest thing I'd ever done up to that point in my life. And certainly it was even worse for him, that I had to do that. And so to answer your question, when I learned about anasagnosia, it relieved me of not only a lot of guilt, but it also relieved me of my anger. I used to be very angry with my brother. I used to think that he was being stubborn or immature. So it's really important. It's for decades we've taught family members, professionals like myself have taught family members to not take it personally if your loved one has a delusion about you, because it's not under their control, right? Same thing with anasagnosia. Don't take it personally. Don't think the person's being difficult if they refuse medication, if they refuse to go to accept a sort of community treatment team management, if they refuse supervised housing. In half of all people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, we see this symptom of the illness. And so, we wouldn't tell someone to stop hallucinating. And yet, for many years, I used to tell my brother and patients that I worked with early in my career, essentially the same thing: stop being unaware of your illness. Now, how would I do that? I wouldn't say it that way. I would do it in the form of trying to break through their denial, educate them, show them the evidence that they were sick. And I would argue with them, usually politely, usually respectfully. But I would never win on the strength of my argument. Where I would win, where I would engage that person in getting help, was never on the strength of my argument. It was always on the strength of my relationship. And that's what LEAP is about. That's what LEAP stands for: listen, empathize, look for areas of agreement, and partner on those. And that program really grew out of a lot of work with NAMI families, frankly. In fact, it was a NAMI family that asked me to write the book, I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help, which is the first book ever written about LEAP. So in many ways, it's really a child of the NAMI community and the shared experience that so many of us have. The first thing is education, learning about the symptom. If your family member's doctor doesn't know about it, ask him or her or their social worker or caseworker to look at the DSM, the diagnostic manual that everybody uses in this country and in other countries. turn to page 304 and read the section on associated features of schizophrenia. And right there, right up front, it says a majority of people with schizophrenia don't believe they're ill. They don't understand they're ill. This is a symptom. It's anosignosia. And it predicts this person not wanting to take medication. It predicts relapse. It predicts other negative outcomes. So get educated. That's the first thing. The other thing is it's hard for people to really understand that if they can't experience it. If you go to our website, the Leap Institute website, there's several free videos on the website. You don't have to buy anything. And you'll see a role play that I did. One is at the Nordic Academy of Psychiatry. Another one is at the National Council on Behavioral Health. You'll see me talking to 2,000 people about anosognosia, and these are directors of community mental health centers. And I do a role play with one of them where I make this person, in a sense, delusional in the context of a role play, and have the experience of what it's like to have their reality judged to be a delusion. So the short answer is get educated about, and if you're watching this video, if you're reading this interview, you've already started down that road. Educate your healthcare professionals that you're working with, that are working with your family member. Have them look at the DSM, page 304. It's a very simple step that they can take, because a lot of health professionals still don't know about this symptom. And then try and have a little bit of an experience of what it's like, because it will help you in your interactions with your family member. Have a look at the video. Look for this role play. It's under the slide anosignosia. You'll see a slide on two of the videos that are posted. The word anosignosia comes up, and you'll see me ask for a volunteer from the audience, and you'll get a taste of what it's like to have your reality turned upside down. And that's what it was like for my brother. He knew he was not ill. Everybody around him told him he was wrong. And it's a very lonely, isolated place for people who have mental illness to be. When they have the symptom, they're cut off from not only the help they often need, but also they're cut off from the people who love them the most, because we're arguing with them. The answer is ancient. It's relationships. Having relationships with one or more relationships with somebody that you trust, that you feel they trust you, they listen to you, they respect your point of view, is absolutely key to preventing relapses. It's key to engagement in treatment. I have so many countless stories where people who are in recovery, who are doing well, I ask them, and our faculty asks them, what was the most important factor? And sometimes they'll talk about medications or this kind of medication or that. And then I'll ask them, well, yeah, but why did you accept that medication? What was the reason? And it wasn't reading, about the value of the medication or the treatment. It was a relationship. So the answer was, well, it was because of my friend Joe, or it was because of my mother, or it was because of this particular social worker. It was because of this nurse who was giving me injections who I became friends with. And not friends like going out to the bar, but friends in a professional context. That you have relationships where you can pick up the phone and text or call someone and say, hey, I decided not to take my meds tonight, and I felt like I needed to share that with somebody. There's somebody I'm friends with who has schizophrenia who does that with me. I'm sort of his I don't know I'm his friend. It's really what I am. And he'll text me, and I'll call him when I get his text. And he went through a period a couple of months ago where he wasn't taking his medications. I didn't jump on him. I just said, so what's going on? Why aren't you taking them? And we had conversations about it, and went on for a few weeks. And it led ultimately, through respectful conversation, to his deciding to go back on the medication. And he's doing much, much better. And he was starting to relapse. So if you're doing well, you're in recovery, don't isolate. That was a long-winded answer. The short answer, the headline, don't isolate. Make sure that you have at least one friend. It doesn't have to be a professional. If it's a professional, that's fine too. But somebody who you trust, that you can talk to about your reluctance to stay in treatment, if that's what's going on, about your depression, about your anxiety, about anything. Stay connected. Well, it started out with a little book. And even before that, the book I mentioned earlier, I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help, but before that, it started as an inpatient 6-session psychotherapy program developed by Dr. Aaron Beck and myself. Most people know Dr. Beck as the person who created cognitive psychology. And what we discovered very quickly is anybody could use the main tools of that program. And that evolved into LEAP. I actually asked Dr. Beck to be involved with LEAP, but he said, you take it and run with it. I've got plenty I'm doing. And LEAP really involves 7 communication tools which have one fundamental value underlying each one of them, which is to create a relationship where there is mutual trust and respect. So 4 of the tools are in the acronym LEAP. Listen. Well, everybody knows how to listen, but actually when you learn how to listen in the LEAP manner, you're doing a very pure kind of reflective listening. So if somebody tells me, I'm not sick, I don't need to take medicine, I need help with the alien implant in my brain, I don't do what I used to do many years ago, which is try to convince them that this was a bad idea to stop medication, that they really were sick, that there was no implant. Instead, what we do now, what I do now, is I'll listen reflectively. So to that person, I would say, let me see if I understand you. Your problem is that you're not sick, you don't need to take medicine, you would like some help with this implant in your brain, is that right? Now, most people, hearing this would think this is a bad idea. You're going to make the delusion worse. There's no research whatsoever and no experience I've ever had where you can make a delusion worse. What you can do is create some confusion, and when I speak at the NAMI convention, I'll be talking about how not to create confusion that damages the relationship. But the thing is that vital tool of listening respectfully. So your problem is this. Let me see if I understand you. Doing that, leading with your ear instead of with your mouth. I'm doing a lot of talking right now. When I'm doing LEAP, I'm doing a lot of listening. And then I'm conveying my understanding and asking, did I understand you correctly? And then if the person says yes, I move to the E, I empathize. That's the second of the 7 tools. You're a very good LEAP practitioner. Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head. And one of the things you said about stories, I'm a big believer in stories and the power of stories, because they do connect us to our humanness. But the next piece I'd add to that is it connects us to each other. And it brings us full circle back to where we started this conversation. How do we help somebody who doesn't understand they're ill? First, we have to understand it's not their fault. It's a symptom of the brain disorder. And that our task is not to try and teach them something that's going to be really hard for them to learn. That is, that they have a mental illness. Our task is to connect to them, to use our own humanity, our own humility, our own powerlessness. I can't get this person to understand they're ill, but what I can do is befriend them. What I can do is share their story, listen to their story, reflect it back. So here's what I hear you saying. These terrible things happened to you. Your brother threw you into the hospital. The police came and picked you up. I'd be angry with him too. I hope somebody had that conversation with my brother Henry. I hope they did. He was in a lot of pain when I did that to him. And through telling those stories, and we connect with one another. And then suddenly we're in a position to help, because the person that we've been listening to, sharing their story and honoring it, is going to want to know what we think. And then we can very humbly say, I don't know everything, I could be wrong, and I'm sorry if this hurts your feelings, but I really think you ought to try taking the medication. I gave away one of the other 7 LEAP tools. I won't tell you what it's called, but it's a way of giving an opinion that is highly respectful of that person's power. Because frankly, the thing we forget all the time is that people with schizophrenia and bipolar and all the other disorders that we're talking about, they're in charge, not us. They have the authority to involve themselves with us and in treatment, or to deny it and run away. Even if they're under a court order, an assisted outpatient treatment order, for example, those don't last for a lifetime. Those are very oftentimes useful, life-saving interventions, but they're interventions. And it's during those periods when the person's back in treatment that I believe our task is build a relationship. Inoculate, I love your term, inoculate that person against another relapse by connecting with them, sharing their story, letting them share their story with you and honoring it, respecting it, and so they trust you and they'll talk to you. And now you have the ability to be persuasive simply by saying, this is what I think you ought to do since you asked me. And you know what you're going to find out? Is the person who doesn't think they're ill says, okay, I'll do it. The last conversation I had face-to-face with my brother Henry, I asked him, Henry, do you think you have schizophrenia? He was very proud of this book, and there's another book that I dedicated to him. It's an academic book, and he had copies of both, and he knew all about what I thought. And I said, people ask me all the time, has your brother developed insight? And I asked him, do you have schizophrenia? And he said, oh yeah, I have it. I said, really, what do you really think today? I mean, it's just you and me. We were in a car, and I know he wouldn't mind me sharing the story. And he laughed, and he called me Javi. He said, Javi, no, I don't think I have it. I said, so why are you going for your injection? Why are you going and taking these pills? He was also taking pills. And he said, I do it because I know you really would worry about me if I didn't, and I do it for Mom and Pops. Mom and Pops are Betty and James. I won't say their last names. They're people who ran the boarding care that he wanted to live in. And by the way, that was another struggle I used to have with my brother. He wanted to live in this boarding care that I didn't think was a good place for him to live, because we could get him in much nicer facilities. Every time I got him into a, quote, nicer facility, and they were physically nicer, and the staff were great, he would leave. He'd break the rules because he wanted to go live with James and Betty. And you know why? Because they respected him, they loved him, they cared about him. I subsequently met them and supported his living with them. He lived with them for, I think, 8 or 9 years in the end. And why did he take his medication? Not because of any knowledge of his illness. He took it because of 3 relationships, according to him. Because of me and because of Betty and James. Because we cared about him, and he knew we'd be worried if he didn't take his medication.